Good morning to all of you. It's so good to see all of you here in the cathedral, and thank you for all those who are joining us remotely. We hope you're having a wonderful day. I don't know about you, but when I got up early this morning, it was about 63 degrees and very little humidity, and I was praising God. You have picked a wonderful day to come and be with us today because in addition to our always extraordinary cathedral choir and treble choir, today we're going to be joined by singers from our choir camp we've had for the last couple of days. And I heard them practice, and you're in for a treat. So thank you to Jason and EJ and all of the staff and all the volunteers who made choir camp possible. It's going to be worth it. Oh man, today's gospel is tough. Let's be honest. Jesus comes off looking pretty bad in today's reading. First, he looks indifferent at best when a woman comes to beg for help for her mentally ill daughter, and then he hurls an insult at her about as offensive as they come. So what could possibly be going on here? Well, let's start by remembering that the Gospels weren't written as neutral historical accounts of Jesus' life. Each of the Gospel writers had a distinct point of view, a specific audience to whom they were writing, and a particular agenda regarding what he thought that was most important for the readers to know about Jesus and Jesus' ministry. And Matthew's primary concern was to convince the Jews that God had sent his son, Jesus, to be their long-awaited Messiah. In the passage we read today, Matthew employs a dialogue between Jesus and a Canaanite woman as the vehicle to accomplish his goals, and he emphasizes the most compelling, even shocking part of the dialogue to make his point. Let's take a look at how he did it. First, keep in mind that in Jesus' time, there were no Canaanites. They had long been defeated. In the Gospel of Mark, on whose Gospel Matthew depended, the woman is referred to simply as a Syrophoenician. The fact that Matthew chooses to characterize her as a Canaanite is dramatic, emphasizing that she is an outsider, and not just any outsider, but a person from one of Israel's ancestral enemies. Her characterization as an outsider is further emphasized by the fact that in Jewish society, no responsible or respectable woman who would have dared to approach a man in public. Yet here she is, confronting Jesus on behalf of her daughter, begging him to exorcise the demon that possessed her child. Of course, Matthew couldn't have conceived that 2,000 years later, modern-day sensitivities would have led us to expect such passionate advocacy. All he knew was that his readers would have been appalled. In fact, he counted on it. And finally, Matthew quotes Jesus as using one of Israel's most demeaning epithets for Gentiles, calling her a dog. Unless Matthew thought it was absolutely necessary, he would never have run the risk of sullying Jesus' image by including such a slur. So in Matthew's account, we have a woman, a Gentile, an outsider, who has broken social convention to plead for Jesus' help. And what happens next is key. He rejects her not once, but twice. First, simply ignoring her, and then acknowledging her plea with a demeaning dismissal. It is not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. Again, what's going on here? Well, I think we may be missing an important part of the story by focusing so much on the miracle of the child's healing. While it is no doubt important, I think Matthew is drawing our attention to something else. By calling our attention to Jesus' ignoring the woman's pleas and then insulting her, Matthew invites us to see Jesus for the very first time as fully human. First, struggling with a bout of indecision as he tries to decide how to respond to this woman, given his mission to the Jews, a mission that was given to him by his father, I might add, whom he certainly wouldn't want to disappoint. And second, resorting to an insult to make her go away, perhaps in hopes of postponing a decision he really didn't want to have to make. Jesus struggles mightily as he decides what to do. I don't know about you, but I just love the fact that Matthew did not feel compelled to whitewash Jesus' image. He was fully God and fully human. Matthew reminds us of something else we often forget. We here in the 21st century know the end of the story. Jesus lived, he suffered, he died, and he was resurrected. But his followers only knew what they saw and heard in the moment. To follow Jesus was dangerous business, involving significant risk and requiring immense courage. And his human frailties, fear of disappointing, indecision, and insensitivity, only added to the challenge. What were they to do with this man, Jesus? In C.S. Lewis's famous book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, young Lucy, who's just arrived in Narnia, asks Mr. and Mrs. Beaver about Aslan, a lion, and the book's Christ figure. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. That you will, dearie, and no mistake, said Mrs. Beaver. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than me or else just silly. Then he isn't safe? Asked Lucy. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver is telling you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. Jesus' disciples risked everything to follow him, not because he was without human flaw, but because they saw that he was good and they could. Every day, we are confronted with the fact that to follow Jesus involves risk. And while the risks we face are for the most part minuscule compared to those faced by Jesus' disciples in first century Palestine, they are no less real. Will my business lose customers if I take what I believe to be a Christ-centered public stand on an issue? Will I lose a friend if my opinion is different from hers? Will my nonprofit lose a donor if I write an editorial that challenges the status quo? Will I be attacked if I participate in an organized demonstration? I could go on. Following Jesus is simple. I mean, how much simpler can he make it? Love God and love our neighbors. But it's also the hardest thing we will ever do. I take comfort in knowing that when I hesitate, when I worry about what others might think, when I postpone, when I am indecisive, Jesus understands. In his humanness, he gets me, and he gets us all. But then he asks us to take the risk anyway. The Canaanite woman took the risk. Jesus' disciples took the risk. And we must too, not because he was perfect, but because he is good and he is our King. Amen.